We're going to continue now with some of the solutions to the problem that we have discussed in topic 6. You have a document that explains the problem, and you also have a document solution, and you have PowerPoints for both. Right now we're covering the solution in the course, everybody knows. And topic 6's problem is this again, and we'll just look at it. We've lied to kids and inflated their grades. We talked about that in the presentation. And the kid has a false sense of his academic ability, and he's going to find out about it sooner or later. And hopefully sooner, so he doesn't end up being devastated by a college rejection letter. And when we look at it, we have to come up with ways that we can grade that give kids a better idea of how they're doing scholastically. So in summation, we have to be aware today of how grade inflation impacts kids. Kids today are more focused on grades than on learning. This one I happen to like a lot. Grade the kid based upon how they scored in relation to the rest of the class. So if the kid got a B, which was a 3.0, and the rest of the class got a 2.7, he was above average in the rest in comparison to the class. If he got a 4.0 and everything was a 4.0 and everybody else got a 4.0, he's in the upper levels of the class, but realistically, what is that telling you? That everybody got an A. So we have to look at that and say, wait a minute, you all got A's. How robust, how rigorous was the content? Test for mastery. Information that a kid receives in a classroom, or anyone receives, if they mastered it, they can give you that information 48 hours later without a problem. Too often today, kids just cram. They memorize the material short term in their short term memory, and then what happens is they go in and take the test. They did okay on the test, but if you ask them anything about the content, 2 days later they wouldn't be able to tell you anything about it, because we don't test for mastery. We have to test and retest to find out if kids really have comprehended what we taught them. Grade effort against the overall difficulty of the course. If a kid displayed no effort, yet still received an A, the course that he's taking may not be challenging enough, or you are, as the teacher, inflating the grade. Take a look at that. If the kid exhibited no effort and still got an A, how can that be? With no effort. I think that we need to reinstitute tracking. And their high school transcript will reflect the track that they're in and the difficulty of the subject matter. See, grades today, the average grade in college today is an A- for kids. The beefing, complaining, the moaning, the parents giving everybody a hard time, all of it has resulted in mediocrity. Kids come out of high school, they're mediocre. They come out of college, they're mediocre. There is a percentage of kids who love learning, who will do well, and these are the kids that score 1,600 on their boards. They end up in Ivy League colleges. They don't care who their teacher is. All they're interested in knowledge. That's a percentage of kids that are the ones that are going to float to the top eventually. And lastly here, we have to grade effort and determine how hard a student works for the grade he earned. If he really worked hard and received an A, that effort should be taken into consideration. I know people that don't exert any effort and get an A. And I know kids that exert tons of effort. Let me back up on that one for a minute. I lost my voice there, folks. I apologize. We have to grade effort and determine how hard a student works for the grade he earned. And the point that I'm making here is, if a kid really exerted a ton of effort, but his test score indicated a C, that effort has to be taken into consideration. There are kids that work tremendously hard, tremendous effort, big hearts, really want to put in the time, and they end up with a C. Then there were kids that put in no effort and get an A. So what we have to do is begin to recognize the effort that kids exhibit in dealing with content area. How do we solve the problem? Number one, become more aware of how these grades are how this inflation is affecting the attitudes of kids. As we stated in number one, the kids are far more concerned about the grade than they are about whether or not they know the material. It is not about the grade, it's more about the mastery. If you didn't get the grade you wanted, you probably didn't work hard enough. That's all there is to it. So we have to make kids understand that, and we have to maybe raise our expectations. We need to create grades that are based upon class performance. If in fact a kid gets an A, where did that A stand in comparison to the rest of the class? If he got an outstanding and the rest of the class was very good, then he's doing pretty good. If he's got an outstanding and everybody's got an outstanding, it's time to take a look at the grading system. We have to teach for mastery. Remember, content that is retained within 48 hours of someone receiving it means they've mastered the content. But most of the time, a kid will fall into that, the top of the pyramid, and appear to have mastered material, but 48 hours later, they're an apprentice. They really haven't mastered it, and it needs to be retaught. But we don't do that. The kid got the A, let's move forward. And I would love to know what would happen if we retested kids even though they got the A 48 hours later to see how they would do. Great effort, as I said, kids just don't put in enough effort for A's, but there are kids that put in a tremendous amount of effort and get a C. I want to recognize those kids. And reinstitute tracking. So a transcript will be indicative of where the kid sat with the material. In other words, was it a 1, a 2, or a 3? Was it hard material? How was it presented? What were the requirements? What were the expectations in the class? He may have gotten an A, but he may have been in a level 3 or a level 1, however the tracking works. So the course content wasn't as robust. So we shouldn't be lumped in with everybody else's A who may have been in honors classes. And we have to grade effort. Like I said, effort is everything. You show the effort, you have the right attitude, but scholastically, you do not comprehend as well as someone else, but your effort is just unbelievable. Your effort needs to be rewarded. Let's back it up just for a minute. Reinstitute tracking. Grade effort we've covered. We have to make sure that we don't we have to look at, I may have brushed over this one, if the material doesn't challenge you, if you're getting an A and everybody else got an A, the material wasn't challenging enough. So we may have to change the material or the curriculum at that point to make it more robust. We want kids to master material, not just learn it for the test, but master it. We want to grade based upon class performance. So what was my class? Now, see, we have class ranking, 4.0, 4.8, whatever you give them. What we're talking about here is classroom, just classroom performance. Where did I sit? Where was that 2.7 in relation to the rest of the class? Well, this is killing me. Again, mastery. We've spoken about that. And I love that line. It's highly possible I didn't get the work I wanted. Let's start becoming aware of the problem, because it is. Did you ever ask your dentist what college they went to or what their transcript was? You see, if grade inflation is that big of a problem, then it's pervasive throughout our colleges. When we go to a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, an accountant, whoever it might be, their transcript might be inflated as well, and you want to make sure you're getting the right care when you go to someone. So next time you go to a doctor, ask him what college he went to and ask him what his grades were like and see what he says. And we're back to the summation. And there you have the material that you can use to address some of the problems that we see with this idea of grade inflation and the fear of affecting some kids' self-esteem. Their self-esteem is going to be affected later in life. This is why we have to be sure we're truthful with them up front. It's very simple. If we lie to them and tell them they're doing better than they actually are, they're going to find out down the road, and that may come when they're 17 or 18 years old and they get a college rejection letter.